I'm Ludo van der Heyden. I'm delighted here to have with me my dear colleague Theos Evgeniou, AI specialist, academic, tech entrepreneur himself, also member of Ventures, and Yann Lechelle, who has had a multiplicity of ventures, to discuss the topic of governance of tech startups.
Thank you, Ludo. A pleasure to be here. A pleasure to have a special guest today, and special in many ways, including in a personal way. Yann, you have been in the very first session I ever taught in my life at INSEAD back in 2001, and we know each other since. It's been 22 years, I think. I'm still here. You've done a lot of things. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, it's a pleasure to be grilled by both of you, actually. Back on campus here 3 years after. I've been in tech forever. I started coding, I was 10 years old. And my first segment of a career was essentially being a software engineer in tech companies. And technology is extremely powerful in the sense that it is an enabler of value creation. Now, I came to INSEAD to build skills in the business sense, in other words, to get a business education formally. Turns out I was probably the only entrepreneur out of my class in 2001, July. And of course, the context was particular because the dot-com bubble had burst. And so everyone was worried about entering that space. Now, I had a business going on and a product that became my first venture. So that's how I became an entrepreneur right after INSEAD. And I've been an entrepreneur for the past 20 plus years.
It was just after the dot-com bubble burst. So it was really in many ways a technological desert in some sense, right? An entrepreneurship desert and funding desert. So the environment was definitely not friendly for a tech entrepreneur in 2001. How did you still make the decision, and what were the main environment challenges you were facing at the time?
So typically entrepreneurs in tech talk about product market fit. And from the standpoint of the entrepreneur, it's always a leap of faith, right? So you believe in the idea, you have a first confirmation through maybe an award, and then through a first conversation with a client. And in my case, I had all of that, right? So that gave me the justification to go forward. That value proposition, in fact, was really challenging because there was little to no funding available in Paris. The ecosystem was not structured. My product was a sort of SaaS, software as a service, even though SaaS at the time did not exist. It was even called ASP, Application Service Provider. But the thing is, the IT departments rejected anything that was sitting outside a firewall at the time, right? So the very notion of software as a service was challenged. So, but this is, repeat history. Entrepreneurs face hurdles and barriers to entry because they come up with new ideas, new models. So this was expected. And at the time, even people said, if people disagree, then carry on.
Maybe to understand what the education comes, many tech entrepreneurs says business school is a waste of time. So, what was your assumption going into business school? What was validated, what was not validated? And was there any extra, that came along that you didn't even expect in your one-year MBA program at INSEAD?
So my profile coming into INSEAD was one of a technician, someone who mastered code to produce software, but I did not have the business savviness that I wanted for myself. Now, coming to INSEAD was a tremendous experience. It gave me not only the network, so I knew that I was buying a network by buying into the program and the alumni community. I knew I was buying a formal education, but also I bought a sabbatical year. It was a perfect time to reflect and actually create this career switch, essentially, from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur. And so the combination of the three things was immensely valuable to me.
It's fantastic. I like what you said about entrepreneurs facing changes all the time. Although there are some periods in history where the changes are drastic. 1995, dot-com beginning, 2001, .com end. Maybe today, AI and generative AI kind of beginning. We'll come back to this and talk about the history of technology and what it means about business governance and opportunities and risks during this discussion. So now going back through all this journey of the past 22 years or so, what are some key highlights of the journey to share?
The first thing you do is you roll up your sleeves. And everything you've learned before or as an MBA student goes out of the door. Because the moment is critical and you're basically late. The moment you start, you're late. You're late because the market is evolving rapidly. We're talking about tech here, right? So the market is on an exponential. So you're late in raising funds, you're late in spending the money that you raise to hire the very good people that you need to execute properly. So you are running and you're head first into the objective, which is to execute, create a product. Usually takes a couple of years until you access the market. Hopefully you've reached the product market fit, and even that's not a given. So then you end up spending money, you have to pivot, you don't have any more money, so you need to convince a new group of investors, typically not the same as the first group, to actually join you on a second type of value proposition. So it's a sequence, and it repeats itself, of pivots and pivotal moments where you need to convince people to give you money. So you need to sell the idea of the company. You need to sell the product to the market. So it's never ending because you have to be pretty much everywhere as an entrepreneur. It's either very lonely or too busy with everything that needs to be done as an executive in a company that has no means. There's no back office, essentially. So it's extremely dense. And I can illustrate this through a number of companies. So I'm not going to go through them all because I've actually founded or co-founded 5 or 6 companies, all of which have been sold. But each of them, in some ways, has been a failure.
I will stop a little bit on this product market fit, pivoting, things moving fast, convincing people. I always find entrepreneurs to be the big heroes of the world. And as Ludo said, I'm myself involved in such a venture. One of the most challenging things I find is questioning yourself. Because through questions is when you pivot, right? And sticking with it while being uncertain about where you are. So can you say a bit about the emotional part and the uncertainty part and generally the attitude of entrepreneurs, especially in the tech world where things are fast and uncertain?
And where, as you say, which is terrible tension, you're always late.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself motivated, How do you avoid the burnout or just giving up?
There is perhaps a trait in all entrepreneurs that actually helps going through this uncertainty, which is either being naive or being foolish in some ways by believing in something which does not exist. I actually refer to the status of a startup being quantum. A startup exists and does not exist at the same time because it is actually cash flow negative for a long time. So this moment where everything needs to be done, you need to align the market with the product and the product with the market. You need to convince people to join your company. That's not an easy feat. So you need to be telling stories. And the risk is, of course, to tell yourself stories. But you need to hold true to this idea of telling a compelling story to go far and further. Now, the journey is not guaranteed. So the reality is that there are moments of reality check. And those moments are triggered either by the market, by force, or by people you surround yourself with. And so I've been, for the past 20 years, I've been experimenting in a way, so it's very experimental, with different shapes and forms of new ventures. As a solo founder, as a co-founder, and I decided early on that being a solo founder was a bad idea. having a co-founder is almost essential because you cannot do it alone.
I'll reframe a little bit the story part you said, and this is a bit personal, and I don't know how you react to this. Personally, what drives me the most and keeps me focused and keep going is the word mission. But different people have different kind of mission-oriented attitudes. I assume entrepreneurs, and especially tech entrepreneurs, are quite mission-oriented. I don't know what's in your experience the importance and role of mission, which of course gives you the compass, but then you have to execute as you said. Can you say something about the missions?
So it's an essential point, and I think we will elaborate on that later on. But typically, my driver was product-based. So I first identified product opportunities. But it is true that the notion of a mission, and in startup or entrepreneurship literature, the notion of the vision, the mission, and the strategy is recent in some ways. 20 years ago, that was not something I identified as being important. And so...
recent to you mean, right?
To myself.
Yeah, okay,
right.
Got it, yes.
But in the literature, generally speaking, especially if you talk about product management today, probably for the past decade, product management links to the mission. And there are tools nowadays to actually make sure that these topics are covered at length.
You're a man on a mission. You have mission now. How did it come about, and how do you place it today in, Yann Lechelle today in 2023?
So today the mission is paramount. In other words, not having a clear mission makes it probably the riskiest avenue, because you need a clear mission to hire people. People today, and I think the market is inverted in some ways, people choose to join companies nowadays. Yes. In the past, companies chose people. And so it is part of this tool set where, in order to recruit the very best people, the people who are most committed to bring value, so there's a contract between the employee and the employer, but that contract is resolved precisely on the adoption of the mission. I am convinced of that, and the very best output comes from people who join the mission.
So I want to shift now to the governance part. You said that you had an aha moment on governance. Could you share that moment and how that came about, and what the consequences were?
So I've been burnt from lack of proper governance, from lack of properly organizing myself, the governance, because I was a key player in many of the new ventures that I created, but not just. And that aha moment came by discussing with Theos. Actually, we met to discuss AI, but through this evolving ecosystem of technology, we ended up talking about our different ventures, because Theos also is involved in his own. And I sort of linked it all together, going backwards. My last involvement was in a structured company, not a startup actually. And governance was a key issue that created issues down the line. I had identified it 3 years ago, and it backfired 3 years after. Now, this was lingering in my mind, but through our discussions, it came clear to me that governance was something that I had, number one, to take into consideration going forward in a very explicit way. And I was able to trace back issues in governance based on the literature I was able to access through your help and our conversations. So it is very clear to me today that governance was something which was mishandled or insufficiently built up in my past experiences, and I could have probably maximized value creation with better governance in hindsight.
So what did you, us, and the world lose the past 20 years because of that?
It's a billion-dollar question. There is no regret. There is no regret. However, learning, of course, is essential, and sharing is essential. So hopefully here we are going to put the highlight on some very important tools for governance and for alignment, for value creation, and for value protection. So the one thing that is interesting in my track record is that I did create or co-create 5 or 6 companies and sold them all. Now, earlier you referred to entrepreneurs as heroes. We're not heroes. We're mavericks. We take
Maverick
risks.
heroes. Yeah.
But calculated risks. Now, what's very good about entrepreneurship is that, generally speaking, it creates value. Now, the risk is value destruction.
And opportunity cost.
And opportunity cost. But that's for the individual. But as soon as you create a vehicle...
No, opportunity cost of failures.
Of failures. Sure, okay, absolutely. So the danger, of course, is not to realize the value creation potential of the vehicle, that typically would be framed by a proper mission statement with a trajectory that is linked to the vision. Now, the danger is that the vehicle will either go bankrupt, and that is true value destruction, right? There's been capital, there's been human time spent and expertise. So if it goes bankrupt, typically there is value destruction. And in an ecosystem like France, where the M&A market is less mature than in the US, we're talking actual value destruction. And that is a shame. Now, in my case, it did not occur. But I would argue that half of the companies that I sold were a failure, because the continuation of the venture, not having to sell it prematurely, would have realized more potential. And governance typically would have helped, go through that phase where selling seems inevitable. In many ways, there are many ways to make sure that you don't have to sell. Because if you are well guided by the board, you will find a means to go beyond that, valley of death, typically where that is the moment of truth. That is the moment where you need to make sure that everyone is aligned to achieve the mission and to maximize the potential of the team, the effort, the product, and so on and so forth. Now, with bad governance, and typically this happens all the time, this is where my ha-ha moment comes in, is that typically when the company struggles with bad governance, this is the end of it.
Can you give us a couple of examples without necessarily mention companies or names, in terms of maybe roles and how it was and how it could have been in order not to get there?
Typically, one of the recent learnings is that the board serves the mission. The board needs to help the CEO execute. And in startups, there is the sort of by default board organization around the shareholders, and that's it. And there is no linking between what the board needs to do to achieve the mission and the evolution of the startup through the different phases, typically where the co-founders are only 100% of the capital. All of a sudden, they own less than 50%, and the company had to pivot. Different mission, different capital, different shareholders, and the notion of governance never resets. And that is a major issue.
Ludo, you have infinite experience among the three of us, the most probably, on specific ways governance fail. And I'm curious whether you...
No, I think Yann has more experience in terms of failure.
You have captured it and theorized it now.
Yeah. So I have seen it and I've experienced it, but I think he's gone through his sort of serial experience. In entrepreneurship, the governance is largely determined by by the founders, who are the owners, but also by the investors. So how can you, which is one of the difficulties in the equation, you need to get the investors, the founders, the early investors, the employees who have options. You need to get all of these people sort of around the governance equation. Is that difficult? And how can you do that, you know, sort of now that you've seen the bad side of it or some bad sides of it?
The thing in the tech industry, in the startups in tech, typically you need to hire a lot of engineering power to build a product. So
Yeah.
you need the cash in order to prove that you're relevant and you've achieved product market fit. Now, raising capital is a binary event. You succeed or you don't succeed. When you succeed, typically that means you've aligned interests. The capital binds with the potential of the project, and the entrepreneurs have succeeded in convincing smart money to join.
So you have the buy-in.
You have the buy-in. But the thing is, that is the honeymoon phase. Now, it's at the end of the cycle that everything goes haywire. Why? Because when there's no more cash, typically you need to make sure that everything else is right. In other words, the KPIs are perfect, you have the right momentum so that you can go on and raise more money to amplify. The thing is, it never happens that way, right? You have to pivot, you have to reset. So the capital is no longer enough to succeed in the pivot. Now,
so the new money should reset the governance in a certain way?
So the new money should reset, and or there should be a reset, intermediary reset, if there is, for instance, a change of mission because of the need to pivot.
And could you illustrate a little bit concretely how this could have happened in some of your ventures, and how it would have allowed pivots to happen faster, better, you know, and more successfully?
So typically I would argue that startups wait too long to bring in independent board members. Usually it occurs around Series B. I would argue it could come as early as Series A or even seed, because independent board members will sort of create a counterpoint to the capital, which typically is misaligned towards the end of the cycle when the KPIs are not there. So the capital will recede, and typically you talk about VC funds, they don't necessarily have the depth in Europe that they enjoy in the US. So they don't have a thesis, so they are generalists. And if they look at 10 positions in their portfolio, they will prefer to write off a company that is not likely to succeed than to actually dive in, because they prefer to wait for the 10th percent, the one that's going to do 10x and maximize the value of the portfolio. So there is a tendency to essentially polarize the conversation when things go wrong. And so the VC will want to divest in some way. The entrepreneurs will want to carry on. And you need that external help to validate whether the mission is the right one to continue or not. And that's usually not there.
That's a powerful and specific point. 3 questions. VCs, CEO, board. Let me start from the CEO. Startup at some point may need to change CEO and bring somebody external. And then you have the founders, the investors, independent directors, and the new CEO. What could be ways, what are set up to fail kind of ways for the new CEO when it comes to governance?
So let's talk about the red flags.
Yes.
In the past, I have identified red flags, but I did not consider them as critical. So I had identified them, and probably later on in my career with experience, but I never made them something that needed to be fixed in a required way. Going forward, I'm going to change that. In other words, if the governance to be defined by the board, by the mission, by members of the board specifically, if something seems to be missing, I will be very explicit about wanting to fix that. And it seems pretty obvious, but it's not. First thing is being aware. Second thing is to actually identify clearly the red flags or the things that need to be fixed. And then the third thing is not necessarily to act, but to make sure that you educate people around the table about the importance of governance, right? So, if that means sending the board to INSEAD to take classes in governance, so be it, right? Typically, everyone needs to raise their game when it comes to governance. So I'm not an expert, but I know for a fact that if we do not tackle this, then we are missing on buying a proper insurance. Proper governance is insurance to protect the downside, to protect the value creation when things become complex. And I guarantee you, things become complex.
What are some tech specificities that make board members of tech companies successful relative to non-tech companies? What should they know?
Going back to my earlier days as a software engineer, software is extremely powerful, and I think it goes without saying that most VCs are not software engineers. So there is a gap of knowledge, and there is probably a sort of abuse on both sides. Tech entrepreneurs, CTOs, they know too much and they use it in a way that creates a sort of superpower, right? We can build this thing, it's going to scale massively and it's going to change the world. It is dangerous, but it is true too, right? Software engineering creates tremendous potential. Now, if you take a banker is going to look at this and say, okay, show me the money, show me the KPIs. But the thing is, they buy into the dream in the VC world, right? Because Silicon Valley has proven to us that companies have made a fortune and there's a path for money making. So everyone buys into the potential. One side overplays it probably, and the other side uses different techniques to actually use their own power, which is access to cash. So to me, that is the one thing to resolve, because there's a sort of a role play, and you need to resolve through instruments like good governance that actually ask the right questions. And the right question is about, typically the mission. How do we achieve the mission? How do we create impact? What sort of return do we expect? Going back to basics, the fundamentals.
So any advice you now give that you now sort of feel strongly about to founders, to people who develop their venture, to people who might think of selling the venture? And one question always is for me, a key question is, sort of what is the mission and what are you building the board for? So looking forward, because many people sort of go more in reactive mode, which is they don't have a board when they need to, or they have the wrong board, for what they're going to face. Any kind of advice, or that is now clear in your head, following your aha moment of governance and discovering what governance can do for startup ventures?
Well, typically to start with, 20 years back, governance was not something in my mind at all. And I did not even voice it for the first decade of my experience as an entrepreneur. So I would say that any entrepreneur should know that governance not only is important from day one, but will become increasingly important. So having a strong notion of what it means, what it is important. Of course, there is different types of governance depending on the stages. It is somewhat flexible in the very early stage. It doesn't have to be so formal, but knowing that it will evolve is key as well. So that means that you can always prepare ahead of time, having people you think might join you down the line, striking conversations. It doesn't have to be too formal again, but preparing the terrain for having the right people at the right time. Now, I think today people are trained to join boards. So there are people available to join the board. So I would state that today entrepreneurs have no excuse to not tackle governance from day one in a gradual manner, in a concerted manner, inviting, of course, all shareholders and all stakeholders to participate in building up the governance.
And the comment you may that often is made is, of course, governance is power. You know, a governor has power, can mandate, and that makes entrepreneurs very afraid of giving the power to a board. What might be your comment on that?
So that is a tricky one, because we could argue that entrepreneurs do not want to relinquish power.
Yeah.
So the one very good exercise as a founder is to decide whether to give up some of that power to the benefit of the mission. And that is a very good question. Doesn't have to be answered, but it's a good question an entrepreneur should ask him or herself. Am I willing to forego absolute power to the benefit of the mission?
Which can be the benefit of the entrepreneur also.
Absolutely. But then again, that means relinquishing something. So typically, should the CEO founder be chairman of the board? I think, Ludo, you have a point on that, right?
Well, I think certainly the founder and the major founder owner, the chairman and the CEO should not be the same person.
Right.
Not all three, right?
Yes, not all three.
So that takes also another leap of faith. You know, who do you give this power to? And so that conversation is a good conversation. It's not easy, I'm sure. It would not have been easy for myself 20 years back. So the fact that it's not easy doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a good question to ask yourself as you create a company. Now, it doesn't have to be right away. In fact, it shouldn't be right away. When you create a company as two co-founders, there's no need to meddle with a third person at that moment. But as soon as money comes in, that is the right moment to ask the question again, very seriously.
And of course, the other excuse entrepreneurs have about governance is that governance is a word that it can mean governance of large corporations, governance of just first money, governance of Series A, governance of Series B. And this confusion, did you have this confusion in your mind yourself when you first encountered the importance of governance between corporate governance of public firms, let's say, versus startup governance?
It's so my last experience, actually, I experienced a reversal from public to private, which changed everything in terms of governance. But typically, I would now ask the question openly, saying, do we have an issue here? First thing. So awareness about governance issues, then asking the question, and then the question is, what do we do about it? Are we sufficiently mature to project ourselves in a situation where the current situation is, the status quo is not acceptable? Are we going to be weakened? The answer is probably yes. We probably need to find a way to create counterbalance, because there is imbalance between the capital, the market, and the startup, precisely because things move very fast.
I was struck by a very entrepreneurial CEO who basically, when we talked to him about governance, he said, there's nothing I hate more than the word governance. What is your response to it? I must say, I will also give my response to it, because he actually didn't know governance. So he hated something that he didn't really understand. And when we explained it to him, he actually concluded, governance is what you do. So don't hate yourself.
Right.
But what is what would you say to an entrepreneur who says governance is bureaucracy, etc.? How could you get him turn him over?
To me, it is all about shifting from control to achieve a selfish gain, either because you have a product vision or a desire to be financially autonomous or whatnot, to stating that the mission is what matters. So in other words, to transcend your immediate impulsion, because being an entrepreneur is also an impulsion, right?
Yeah.
It's a leap of faith based on your belief that you will succeed. But the notion of success is secondary to the mission bringing value to society. So in the end, I think the one question, again, it's the entrepreneur looking himself or herself in the mirror. Am I doing this for the mission, or am I doing it for myself?
What are your key messages to the tech entrepreneur in general, as an experience, and then maybe what are the key lessons to an investor, and what are the key lessons to a board member?
Tech is everywhere. Everyone should use tech. Everyone should use AI as well in their businesses. So let's go back to business and businesses at large. New ventures using tech, like everybody does, are creating new value and capturing new value. I would say that we need to go back to fundamentals and link it to the challenges ahead, which is the purpose and the mission. How do we create long-lasting value by making sure that we are compatible with future-looking issues such as environment, such as social impact? How do we wrap it up properly? And how do we create proper governance to maximize our ability collectively, but also individually, to capture, create, and distribute that value properly? I think as entrepreneurs, we have this chance to be able to define that early on. And entrepreneurs typically want to change the world. Well, that is how they should do it. In other words, to change the world, they need to ensure longer-term value capture, creation, and distribution. In other words, they cannot not use proper governance to do that. Otherwise, they will probably destroy value along the way and therefore not play the part that they should have.
And not achieve their full potential.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is a process. Also, I think the word I like with you is it's a mechanism for alignment on the mission, which is to align. You also need to give up, and I think also sometimes very often entrepreneurs are too tight and don't want to give up, and then actually pay the price, which is it's value destruction. They hang on too much, and I think it's a very emotional journey. And I think the governance can actually, help them succeed in the journey. I'm always struck by the fact that, you're not allowed to drive a car without insurance, but you're allowed to destroy a company without proper governance, and so that is sort of the other side of the argument. It's value preservation, and then leverage, which is you can actually attract investors better
And realize the potential,
Yeah.
right? It took Yann a number of years to reach this realization. It's a pleasure to see you after 22 years for this journey.
It's just the beginning.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.